Hello and welcome to the Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors PrecisionHydration.com.
Precision Hydration offer electrolyte drinks in different strengths to match how you sweat. Personalise your hydration strategy today at precisionhydration.com and get a free box or tube of pH worth up to $9.99 using the code Oxygenaddict.
We're also brought to you by TeamOxygenaddict.com Triathlon Coaching.
Helping hundreds of age group triathletes see huge improvements in their 70.3 and Ironman performances. The time training system makes sure that you get the important training done each week in a way that complements the rest of your life.
And we're also brought to you by the delicious fueledbycake.com.
That would be my charity cake recipe book with loads of delicious recipes, some of which are perfect for making snacks for the bike rides. There are loads of recipes from the likes of Chrissy Wellington, Emma Pooley, Rob's Nan, and many more. You can get yours at fueledbycake.com for just £10 and it all goes to charity.
And hello and welcome to the show. It's the week of the 21st of January as we're talking, and Hells, I've got good news for you.
You tell me.
We mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but I noticed it for the first time last night. Rob's official flag of the days are getting longer. Yes. Yesterday was the first day I was like, it's 4:30 and it's still light. It's on the way.
Yes, I noticed that the other day and I thought, oh, it's not dark now that we're driving down this road at this particular time.
Yeah, exactly. Summer's on the way. Of course, we're going to get 4 weeks of snow, having said that now. But keep the faith, everyone. It's on the way. The worst of the darkness and the coldness is over, for sure.
Are you struggling, Rob, to get up in the mornings at the moment? Or is that just me? Because I am a morning person, but honestly, at the moment...
Hells, I'm right there with you. January is... I'm like Yogi Bear. I'm in the back of the cave, and God help you if you come near me. If I can make it out of bed before about 7:45 during January... Yeah,
really?
Exactly. Yeah, it's as bad as that. Today I was up the usual time of 6:30 and I went down and did the usual morning routine. And it was like an hour and 15 minutes before it felt even like it wasn't the middle of the night, you know? It was pitch black outside the kitchen doors.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, beastly.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because honestly, the alarm went off this morning at 6:30 and... I had to not get out of bed. I had to stay in probably till 5 to 7. And honestly, it's not really like me. And I keep on thinking, and I wouldn't have hit snooze. I was still awake, but I just couldn't get out of bed. Yeah. It's on Tuesdays at the moment. I do PT with someone at 6:30, so that's good. That gets me up, and it's all fine. And I don't know. Let's say. Probably in the run up to Christmas, I was going to the gym a bit on Mondays so I'd have to get the train at sort of 6:10, and that would be fine. And it's almost like if I don't have that first thing to get out of bed for, woo.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think give yourself a bit of a break at this time of year, because if you're managing to do that, even a few days, that's awesome. But our bodies definitely have a natural rhythm to them, and they definitely seem to lead to sleeping a bit later during the winter time. So if that's the case, I think we just treat it like our lives are cyclical, you know, or cyclical. Is that the correct phrase? I'm not sure.
It sounds like, but that's the other thing in the back of my mind. I'm thinking actually it's okay at this time of year because
definitely because in the summer you'll be up at 4:30 some days when it gets light.
Exactly. And if I was a tortoise, I mean, I always think that I'd clearly be in a box at the moment asleep.
You should have a t-shirt with that made on. That should be your winter t-shirt. Maybe we should get some podcast t-shirts made with that on. If I was a tortoise, I'd be in a box in the back of the wardrobe right now. Oh, the wisdom of Helen. I love it.
I know. Yeah, these brains. God.
Oh, well, I've had a look around the web, the old Tinterweb. Not much has happened. I was sounding very northern then, didn't I? Not much has happened this weekend in terms of results. In fact, I can't find anything, but we have got some news to talk about. So we'll start off. We'll do a quick shout out to our sponsors, PrecisionHydration.com. They've got a hydration workshop coming up this week, January the 26th at 5 o'clock in Chester at Pro Physio. There's going to be discounted sweat testing available all day from 9 till 4. And all you've got to do is go to the link in the show notes and you can book yourself a slot. So there's all kinds of cool stuff going on there. But if you're anywhere in the area and you can get nearby, first up, I'm sure you'll meet loads of awesome triathletes there. But they put on a really interesting hours presentation about all different manner of, how electrolytes help you and how sweat can damage you in ways that you didn't realize was actually going to damage your performance. So we've both seen it, haven't we, in the past when Johnny came up to Knutsford, and it was really good, wasn't it?
Really, really informative, and you're sort of sitting there watching it and interacting as well, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that. So yeah, you will learn loads, and you will absolutely improve your knowledge about all things hydration and what they offer that can help you as well.
Yeah. So if we've got any new listeners, because our listener numbers seem to have gone through the roof the last couple of weeks, which is awesome. So if you've not heard of Precision Hydration, go to precisionhydration.com. You can take the online sweat test, which will give you a lead as to whether you're a particularly heavy or particularly salty sweater. Both things can be bad for your performance. And if that's the case, they've got the best electrolyte salts and tablets on the market, in my opinion. So you can pick yourself up £9.99 worth using the code Oxygenaddict, and that'll get sent to you for free, which is great. You get £9.90. I think you've got to pay the postage, haven't you?
Yeah.
I think so. So basically it's a risk-free trial of their stuff. It's awesome. It doesn't taste salty like other electrolyte drinks do, and it will solve those horrible calf cramps in the pool. Do you know, Hells, I was in the pool the other day. I did the swim after a bike and a run in the gym.
Oh.
Had forgotten my salt tablets with me today, but thought, whatever, I'm going to do it anyway. Here I am at the gym. There's the pool. I'm going to get in anyway.
No.
I made it 3 times 50 meters before getting out with feet like gnarled claws. I was like an orangutan that had escaped from the jungle.
I was going to say it
was not pretty.
No. At the Tri Club we have a spin session, and then there is a swim session afterwards. And last week we did it in a little January treat. We did an FTP test,
yes,
and
that's right.
Yeah, I did say, is anyone going swimming after this one today? And for once, nobody put their hand up. They've all learned.
Yeah, it'd be particularly brutal, wouldn't it? You got to give it a try every time and then go, no, it still doesn't work for me.
No.
Still can't swim after training. Oh, good. Right, let's have a chat about what's been going on around the world in terms of news and triathlon from what we found. The first big news is, and we kind of had a bit of a heads up on this already, but everyone else gets to find out now, Outlaw X.
Yes, so a new Outlaw Triathlon is going to be coming in September this year. They're going to be celebrating 10 years of Outlaw. So it's a half iron distance race, which is going to be in North Nottinghamshire on the 22nd of September 2019 in Thoresby Park.
Thoresby. It looks good, doesn't it? It looks really beautiful. It looks like a really classic English country house kind of place for having a race. So good news. Another 70.3 in the UK. So that's 3 half distance races in the Outlaw series and 1 full distance race now for them. So very exciting news indeed. So 22nd of September, check it out over at outlawtriathlon.com.
Yeah, and the other thing is that entries open on Thursday, the 31st of January, to anyone who pre-registers before midnight on January the 30th. So to pre-register, just head to outlawtriathlon.com, go and sign up, and then you can enter officially on Thursday, January the 31st.
It wouldn't surprise me if that sells out really quickly as well, like the other races in their series have done, because it'll be a good end of season race to do that. And I think the UK is ready for another big branded 70.3 around that time, the kind of late season peak or second peak of the season kind of race. I think that'll be an interesting race.
Yeah, and it always, like Outlaw Half Nottingham sells out so quickly. That one's sort of the season opener in May, isn't it? And Outlaw Full, which we have mentioned, that's sold out as well. That's at the end of July, and hopefully we will be there, Rob.
Yes, indeed. Sure will. Exciting. Won't be long now, Hells, till the summer rolls around, will it? Now that we've had Rob's official springtime's on the way flag in mid-January for some reason.
It's practically here.
It's practically here.
Practically here.
All right. So next bit of news then, with on a theme of summer coming around soon and a bit of sunshine, is Triathlon's $1 million challenge begins in a couple of weeks' time at 70.3 Dubai, where I tell you what, $1 million on the line. That's going to be exciting. There's only one person who's won this, isn't there, in the past?
Yeah, Daniela Reef won it, didn't she? The $1 million sort of triple crown, the Nasser bin Hamad triple crown, which incorporates 70.3 Dubai, which is literally in about a week and a half as we're recording this.
1st of February, isn't it? I think it's on. Yeah.
Then the 70.3 World Champs, which this year are in Nice, in France, on the weekend of the 7th, 8th of September. And then 70.3 Bahrain, which is usually end of November, early December. So in order to win that $1 million, you have to win all of those 3 races. So it is no easy thing to do at all, and that is why only Daniela Reef has done it before.
Big old ask, that, isn't it?
Oh, massively, to be sort of up and raring to go at this time and continue all throughout the rest of the season. I mean, that is pretty much 11 months, isn't it?
I wonder whether there are athletes out there who are looking at that and going, I'll make that that's my season's goal, having $1 million on the line, compared to, I don't know how much you get for winning Kona or the 70.3 World Champs, but I don't think it's more than about 150 grand, is it, for the win?
But you'd still have to win the 70.3 World Champs.
Yeah, but I don't think
so.
Yeah, you do. You're right. You have to win that on the way. That's a good point.
Yeah. So it's very, very difficult. But Rob, 70.3 Dubai is going to be a great race to begin with, isn't it? Christian Blumenfeld has said that he's going to do it. He won Bahrain, where he smashed the world record, didn't he? Across the 70.3 distance, absolutely blitzed it. Ali Brownlee.
Yeah, he's confirmed, isn't he?
Yeah, he's confirmed. Who else on that male pro start list? Adam Bodum.
Yeah.
So then Ronnie Shieldknecht, Patrick Nielsen.
Is Terenzo on the list?
Not at the moment on the one that I can see in front of me, but never say never.
Terenzo's always in great form, isn't he, this time of year? That would be perfect for him. I mean, I know he's probably got his eyes on Kona as well, but wouldn't you love to see Ali Brownlee, Christian Blumenfeld and Terenzo going against each other over the 70.3 distance 3 times in a year? Oh,
yes.
Great racing.
Yeah. Well, this is on the Ironman, Ironman.com sort of website. It's a start list, and I imagine that they can still add to it, but these are the names on it at the moment. And on the women's side, Holly Lawrence, who won 70.3 Bahrain as well, just at the end. Yeah, just gone. Annie Haug as well, who's really doing well since stepping up from the ITU. Sarah Lewis too, another mean athlete. Precision Hydration as well, sponsor her. Angela Nace on there, Fenella Langridge, who we've had on the show. So yeah, it should be.
You've got the potential for massive head-to-heads in the women's race as well, haven't you?
Yeah, it's good.
Is Daniela Reef on the list?
Nope.
Ooh, interesting.
There you go.
Maybe she's staying in bed in January hells.
Well, no, I don't.
Softly cushioned by a mattress filled with $1 million from 3 years ago.
Well, as I say, I don't think that list is definitive, and I think more names will be added to it.
Yeah.
But those are the names on it at the moment.
Good stuff. All right, so a little bit more news around the Brownlees, actually. They're both going to be showing up to open the Triathlon Show London, which is going to be awesome, I think. Chance to go and see those guys open it up.
Yeah, so it's the Triathlon and Bike Show, isn't it, in London?
Yeah.
Which starts at the end of March, so Friday the 29th of March. It's like 3 days, isn't it? And loads of opportunities to go and get involved and, meet loads of different brands. Yeah, exactly. See all the new bikes, go and meet like-minded people, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, London Bike Show and the Triathlon Show London.co.uk.
Great stuff. All right, so let's shuffle forwards and let us do our interview of the week. And we've been leading up to this one for a few weeks now. I've had this in the bag for a few weeks. It was great to interview both Phil and Anna. Phil White and Anna Dopico have just released a book on the Cervélo story. It's called To Make Athletes Faster. And obviously a lot of people know the name Phil White as one of the two founders alongside Jared Bruman of Cervélo, the bike brand. And his partner Anna has produced this book about the story from all the way from starting up the company in the basement of the house at college all the way through to selling the company a few years ago. So I've always been, I mean, you know this, Hals, don't you? I've always been a massive Cervélo fan. I'm a total fanboy. I did the interview with the two of them and I had my bikes in the background of the office so they could see them going, look, I really am a fan. So it was really interesting to talk to them right from the very time I got into triathlon back in 2001, 2002. I always loved the look of Cervélo bikes being slightly different to anything else that was on the market at the time. And it was great to get a chance to get them on the show and interview them. So here we go, today's interview of the week with Phil White and Anna Dopico. Really pleased to have Phil and Anna on the show. It's a real honor to have you two here. We've got, firstly, Phil, obviously founder of Cervélo Bicycles. Anna, I think if we can use the phrase long-suffering, would that be correct?
I think that scores me some points.
having been through
this interview's over.
So having been through the book, I mean, it's amazing that obviously you've been there from the beginning and you've written the book, which is essentially the story of Cervélo, but it's so much more than that, isn't it? It's the story of friendship and the story of how the company was founded and the story of, I mean, the real arc of this is, and I don't think people are going to quite realize this until they hear you tell the story on the podcast, but I was amazed reading the book how this massive company, Cervélo, that, as you've seen, I've got two of your bikes here. They're ridden by all the top pro triathletes. They're in the Tour de France. You've had World Championship victories, Tour de France victories, multiple Ironman victories. Was essentially started by two student friends in the basement of a house as a university project. And you've managed to go from this point all the way through to sort of, I don't think global domination is really overstating it. So congratulations, firstly.
Well, thank you.
Anna, first up, your mission to write the book. How long did it take you to conceive it and actually put it together? Because it's an amazing story, but it's also, you've done a beautiful job of getting it illustrated, and it's a real sort of coffee table masterpiece. Anyone who's into bikes or Cervélo bikes in particular is really going to love it, I think.
Oh, thank you. It took about 3 years from the moment I got the idea until I hit the print button. I spent about 6 months doing some industry research, trying to find an editor. I spent about a little over a year interviewing Phil and Gerard, as well as employees, suppliers, athletes, customers. And then it probably took about 4 months to do final editing and the graphic layout of the book.
And have you recovered yet? Have you recovered from the process? Because I think, having followed the story in the book, it seemed like you'd all got to the point where you needed a break. And then it suddenly occurred to me, from a creative point of view, you've gone from that needing a break from Cervélo to creating a book, which was probably more work than the original company was.
You know, it was a really enjoyable endeavor. It was like a passion project, so it was really fun. The only thing that was, I guess, a little bit challenging was when I actually went to hit the print button. You know, everybody told me I'd suffer a bit of artist anxiety when I hit the print button, and they were all right.
So let's go right back then to the very origins of this story. Where did you guys meet, and where did you meet Gerard, and how did Cervélo come about in the first place?
Well, Anna and I, well, you tell the story. We knew each other for years. So I'd gone off to Montreal and gone back to McGill, and before that I'd worked in aerospace and gone back to do my master's. Anna and I were already hooked up at that point. And
hooked up, that's a nice word.
I was already the ball and chain for her at that point.
Even more endearing.
Hey, it's on me, not you. Anyways, but you know, when I went to McGill, Jordan and I were in the same composite materials lab, and so we'd see each other at things and just got chatting, and so I knew what he was up to, and then he was telling me one day that, you know, the university wasn't going to pay for making his project, which he needed to do to get his master's, and they weren't going to give him any lab space to do it either. And I said, well, I'll give you a hand. I got nothing to do for the summer, so where are we going to do it? I'll throw in a few $100, and, you know, how much can it cost to make a prototype? And so we figured out the best way to do it was in the basement of where he was living. It was a house that was, I guess it probably had 6 or 7 students in it, and it was owned by someone whose son was actually at university there. So the son was kind of the landlord. So we started off doing it there and made a mess, and they complained. And so we started doing it kind of when they went out to school. We'd sneak in the basement and make things in, you know, epoxy. And so they'd see us with masks on and kind of go, that stuff's so toxic. Why are you doing it in our basement? So we just stopped doing it when they were around, when they weren't around. And we'd cure stuff in the oven when they weren't around, and we'd make sure we had the oven cleared out by the time that they were doing their lasagna in it for dinner. So, yeah, it was cheap. I mean, when you start something, you got to figure out ways to do it for nothing. So that was the way we started.
So basically, the first bike, what became the Cervélo prototype bike, was essentially made in the basement. It was cured in the oven of the house that you were living in and put together that way. And that was the basis for starting the company, right?
Yes.
I love this. Because again, the thing that the book really gets across is, I think anyone who's tried to start any kind of business, you go through this phase of feeling like an imposter and thinking that everybody else knows what they're doing and everybody else is a legitimate company, and you guys are just kind of making it up as you go along. But at every step in the process in this book, you've really gone into kind of warts and all here, Anna, about how, you know, you make this bike and then the guy won't give it you until you pay him X amount of money, and he turns up with 2 heavies and demands his money because he wants it now. And it really was every step along the way. You've had to battle for this, haven't you? Nothing got given to you at any stage, it seems, without massive amounts of almost things going wrong.
Yeah, some things they went really wrong on the way along. I mean, it's just perseverance. I mean, someone said, I was reading a quote someone recently, and they said, you know, like, how many great projects were never launched because they stopped just before the line. You know, they just pushed a little bit harder, and they would actually got it over the line and would have become a great project. So we just kind of kept grinding and just kept going at it. I don't know where we got that from, but yeah, we certainly, Gerard and I and Anna to a certain extent also, we just had that, just keep grinding and we'll eventually triumph.
So that first prototype that you came up with, which I believe you titled, was it the Baracchi? Is that the correct pronunciation?
Baracchi, yep.
Baracchi, okay. 2 things about this. The first thing is, it's an amazingly beautiful looking machine for anyone who hasn't seen it. It was so different to anything bicycle looking that was around at the time, with it not having a seat tube on. Did you, as you were making these bits and bobs out of carbon fiber and putting them in the oven to cook, did you have worries it was actually going to support somebody's weight as you put it together? That's the first part of the question. It was so radical looking. How was the process of actually getting on it for the first time?
Well, you know, Jordan had done the calculations on the loads in the carbon, and you know, as you put it together, you do it out, and then we got to a point where it had the appropriate amount of carbon on it, and we looked at each other and said, "You gonna ride that?" It's like, maybe you're gonna ride it first, and it's like, I'm not riding that. That's way too late. So we added a couple more layers because we just didn't trust our own calculations, which was probably smart. We never did have any problems with it. It came out a bit heavy, but it was certainly stiff and strong.
And then in the early days, you tell a great story in here about how you tried to get Gianni Bugno to ride it.
Yeah.
Tell the listeners how you actually got the word to him that you wanted him to have a go.
Well, actually, Gerard George was a huge Bunyo fan, and he'd had this idea that we could make it was his concept of the faster TT bike. And so he wanted to get a hold of Bunyo because he looked at it and said, we can make this guy faster. And so this is pre-internet days. And so how do you get a hold of some guy somewhere in Italy? So he just, Bunyo is a pretty big celebrity, a double world champion. So he just took a letter, with an envelope and wrote Gianni Bunyo, Italy, and stuck it in the post. And it got to him. And, Bunyo was pretty supportive, and their team was super supportive. They sent a bunch of wheels and equipment and stuff for us to build. So you see the wheels on the bike, probably some of the other components as well. Those all came from their team to support us in the development of that bike. So they were really supportive. Their sponsor was a little less interested, as in not at all. And that's kind of where it fell apart. But, certainly the team and Bunyo were super supportive of it. And that was like, that was what carried us through in the early days, is like, how cool is it to make a bike for a double world champion? It's like, there's 2 kids in university, man. This is the best thing ever.
And then at some point you guys decided to pivot. You decided to kind of move away from the carbon fiber and start trying to build something that would be a bit more commercially useful, or not commercially useful, but commercially viable, and build things out of aluminium tubing. But you didn't use round tubing. That was a massive step forward, wasn't it, for the cycling industry? It sounds like at the time, and especially a lot of the Italian bike manufacturers, it sounds like, wouldn't even consider bikes made out of tubing that wasn't round. Was that your experience at the time?
Yeah, well, we didn't really understand that very tradition-driven culture of cycling, especially in those days. And so it just seemed obvious to us that if you can make someone faster, why would you not do it? But we didn't understand that culture and everything that was behind it. So we just said, well, how do we make some people faster? And we said, well, we can use aluminum because we can make better shapes in it, and it's still going to be light. And so we went and did our own tubes, and everyone thought we were nuts. But, at that point, people were making sort of aero tubes. They were just taking a round tube and squashing it. And we said, well, why don't we just, make our own tubes? We'll just pay for the die and extrude them. And at that point, a die was $800 or $1,000. So, it was pretty trivial. And then you run your own tubes, and you had your own shapes that were better. And we put material on the side, because as you're crushing the tube, we're making it narrower, it gets less stiff that way. So we said, we'll stiffen it up by putting more material on the sides, which we called Smart Wall. Easton had this, what did they have it? They had some term for their budding. And we looked at it and we said, yeah, it's really just paper wall, and all the materials was designed for bad welding. And we said, we're just going to do good welding. We won't need all this budding at the ends. We'll put the material on the sides where it's going to make it stiffer. And so we just made our own tubes. It was easier and cheaper, and we got better tubes out of it. And that's how we were able to start our own bike in aluminum. The tough part was finding someone that would actually weld it together, because in those days, the concept of kind of virtual manufacturing, where you would, we didn't own any of the equipment, and it was really weird. It was hard to find someone. The banks looked at us and said, hang on, let me get it. You're a manufacturer, but you don't make anything. And we go, yep, that's exactly it. And so it was a tough sell. Banks didn't want anything to do with us, because we had no assets that they could tie a loan to. And it was tough to find someone that was willing to do that for us. But we did eventually find a company, Da Vinci, which is north of Quebec City. So it's about 6 or 8 hours from Montreal. And they're still around today, doing really well. They make the majority of the Bixie bikes, well-established brand. Anyways, they were super supportive of doing those bikes for us.
So you guys you were really way ahead of your time in terms of, if you look around now, there's so many companies on the internet who design something and outsource the production somewhere else. You guys were, I don't know whether you were the first, but you were certainly, looking back, you were way ahead of your time in terms of thinking, well, we can design this. We don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars having all the equipment to make it. We can get someone else to produce it for us.
Yeah, I mean, it was a model that we had that, we said, well, how can you invest in, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in all this equipment and leave it idle for, 80% of the time? Because we weren't selling much. At the start we were selling almost nothing. So why would you waste your money? It's just sitting there, just burning dollars, and we had very, very few dollars. So let's spend them where they make the most sense. And we looked at it and we said, okay, we could weld, but I mean, you really wouldn't want to buy a frame that I'd welded together. So our strength was really in the engineering side of it, and to a certain extent as we learned over time, in the marketing side. We could do a pretty good job selling it because we could tell a really authentic story about the engineering behind it.
Yeah. Anna, what was your take on this as this project went from something that started in the basement as a university master's project to something where we're going to try and make a couple of bike frames for a world champion to now we're going to start a bike brand? How was that experience for you all the way through?
Well, it was really exciting. I had a business background, so this was this is any business student's dream.
Right.
And I always prepared myself for the worst, though, because I didn't anticipate Phil called me just about when he was going to finish his semester, and he said, "Hey, Anna, I got some great news." And I thought, great, he's got a really good job. Said, well, that bike project that Jared and I were working on? And then I thought, oh, here it comes. We're going to start a bike company.
She thought we were nuts. That's a short story.
Well, I was a commercial lender at the time, so I knew the challenges that they were up against. I did think it was an exciting opportunity. But for the first 5 years in Canada anyways, the failure of probability is roughly 50-50. So I thought, okay, well, we have to prepare ourselves for a worst case scenario. So one of the things that we planned was I would continue to have an outside salary. So worst case scenario, we had my outside salary. And the moment that I guess was awe-inspiring for me was when they actually got their commercial space for the first time. I remember walking around in the warehouse thinking, wow, look at all this inventory. And it was all neatly stacked and arranged, and they had a little section for the assembly, and they had their own office space. And I just remember walking around thinking, I don't know how they lived out of the house all this time. And at that moment, I thought, wow, these guys have got a business. It's going to happen.
Well, this is really funny because I think people listening are going to go, well, of course they've got a warehouse. This is Cervélo. They're the biggest triathlon brand in the world, and they've won the Tour de France. And of course, your book walks through this situation where you would come home and open the door and your house was literally jammed from top to bottom with bike frames in boxes, and you couldn't get in through the doors. And it really was like this scrappy startup the whole way through. And you do a great job of talking the reader through sort of like year one. I forget the exact numbers, but it almost seems like the turnover starts at almost nothing, but it doubles every year, and it goes from a few $1,000s to 50,000 to 100, 200, 400, and then you get in, and it keeps doubling even as you get into the millions, and you think, well, we know that story now, this enormous slick marketing machine that produces these incredible bikes, but right the way back in the beginning, it must have been amazing to get what was the first P2 in aluminium and have it painted up and take it to a show and have people buy it, and then to go from that to build it into what the brand became eventually. It's just an amazing story.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly is.
People ask me about that, like, how do you feel about that? And when you're in the trenches, just grinding away and just trying to get out stuff, which we were always late for, we never had financing. It just, you didn't really notice it growing. It just there's more to do, and you just kind of get working on it all the time. I don't think you really notice it the same way when you're right in the middle of it. it's probably quite a bit different from the outside.
Yeah. Well, two things struck me. That the first thing is when you had that first aluminium P2, it's how similar it looked to the one you ended up producing in carbon, what was originally the P2C. It was a really slick looking bike. I mean, the P2 was kind of an iconic bike, and then the P3 was an even more iconic bike. But that very first aluminium P2 it almost looks exactly the same as that carbon P2 did. And that must have been it looked like nothing else around at the time, back in what would that have been, the late 90s probably?
Yeah, I guess we launched that in 96. And it was quite different at that point. Really, it was us and Project 96 in the States that were doing that. But, before we went and started to make anything, we'd been to the wind tunnel a bunch of times. There used to be this group of people over New Year's that used to go to Texas A&M in College Station, Texas. And there was all these people that no one had actually there was one that was Steve Head was kind of the leader of it, and he kind of bankrolled a lot of that. But it was just a bunch of Steve's friends and hangers-oners that we'd bring stuff down through it in the wind tunnel, and then we'd go to Applebee's afterwards and look at the results and compare things like what worked, what didn't. And it was just a really fun time for a bunch of engineering geeks. And so, we'd learned a lot before we ever put pen to paper on our first commercial design. And that was, it gave us a huge advantage. But the reason it looked the same is because we'd sorted out like the big things that really made a big difference was that rear wheel cutout, like protecting that or fairing the rear wheel. And we learned that was super important, and that was a big part of every design that we ever did. Just maximizing the amount of fairing effect we could get on the rear wheel.
Well, you guys were also really ahead of the curve in terms of focusing on bikes for triathletes. Back in a day when there was really nobody else doing that apart from maybe arguably Quintana Roo, where Dan Enfield was really into making bikes specifically for triathletes as well. And obviously with the benefit of hindsight, with triathlon having exploded, you guys were perfectly placed for that. But it strikes me that there was a tremendous amount of vision there on your part to think there's enough of a market there for us to build a brand around a sort of triathlon specific time trial bike. Was that something that you deliberately went after back in the sort of mid 90s, the time trial market?
Well, we started off making that time trial bike for Bunyo, and then we started looking around to see, how many of these could we sell, and pretty clearly the answer came back quite quickly that the answer was almost none. It's like, time trialists, there weren't very many of them, and they generally got a free bike because they were on a team. There just wasn't. There were a couple of areas like Southern California. There was a really well-developed time trial market or time trial group of people, but there wasn't really going to be much of a market there. And at just the same time, one of my friends from university was a pro triathlete, and he was saying, you should sell these to triathletes. They'd be all over this. They were always trying to go faster. And so it was like, oh, hang on. First of all, here's someone that's looking to go faster, which is what we were all about.
Yeah.
And they had no preconceived notions of what a bike was. So if you go back to the early days of triathlon, they would ride the craziest, wildest designs, even if they didn't work. Everyone was just constantly searching for something that would work faster. Whereas the cycling community was totally tradition bound and wouldn't take anything that wasn't, a fillet brazed, or maybe not fillet brazed, but, but a steel round tube frame made in Italy or maybe France and maybe the UK. I mean, those are the three hotbeds of it. So, they just didn't want to touch it because it was a weird bike. Whereas the triathlete who had more money, wanted to buy it and would try anything, it was quite obviously the best spot to focus our time.
You tell a great story about you guys going to Ironman Canada and not being allowed into the official race expo and basically setting your stall up in the street. Will you tell that story for the listeners?
Well, it was Gerard actually that went out to that, because we used to split every year, and I would go to Mrs. T's in Chicago and he would go to Ironman Canada. But yeah, we got used to, in the early days, the only thing we really did for marketing was going to events. So we found that it was an educational process. We would talk to customers or potential customers about why our bike was faster. And you could show it to them and they could take it for a test ride. And we realized early on that, our bike was significantly different and it felt faster. People could take it out for a quick spin and they would go, yeah, I get it. This bike is just faster. I already get it. And so it was just a natural extension. We were doing a lot in Southern Ontario, around Toronto in that. And a bunch of our friends were going out and doing Ironman Canada. And we had one of our retailers exhibiting there. So we just said, we'll go out. And that was kind of typically how we did it. We'd kind of go out and just sort it out when we got there. And so George just sorted it out and was phenomenally successful. I mean, I think he had the number of people he set up on bikes, like just like the day or 2 days before Ironman. This is the race that you've trained all season for, and you're going to swap your bike the day before to a completely different bike in a completely different position. We always just looked at it, are you really sure you're doing this? But they almost all of them came back and set like massively better PBs. And you kind of go, there's something to this. And people would just get it and they go, yeah, I'll buy that one when I leave here. Because it was, more comfortable and way faster.
And then there's that great story about how, like any of the stock that was left over, he kind of said, I don't want to bring this back, and I don't want to have to stick it back in the car. And what did he do? Go and find a bike shop on the main street and offer them to sell them all the kit that was left.
Yeah, it was he basically did. Like they'd seen that the bikes were moving, but they had no intention, I don't think, of buying all those bikes. But George said he just sat there and waited didn't say anything and waited for them. He made them an offer and just waited until they said something. And he was just sweating it out because that was our funding for the next 2 months. So if we didn't sell them, we were going to be, we were already eating like ramen noodles and bread, but I think we would have been eating dry ramen noodles or whatever. There would have been much less to eat if we hadn't sold those bikes.
Again, all the way through this book, I'm really struck by, and again, Anna, it's credit to you to how you've written this. You really feel as though you're in this adventure with you guys as you go along, about how it really was like a hand-to-mouth existence. We've got to sell 4 bikes today because there's no money to pay the guy who's made the tubes for us 6 months ago. And it really was like a process of you were really driven to do it, and how it was the 3 of you on the phones making cold calls to bike shops, seeing if they would take some of your frames off your hands, essentially. It's incredible all the way through how that becomes the Cervélo brand that we know today.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, Jordan and I, we used to sit there right at the start with one phone between us, one of the old dial phones, and he'd push it over to me, and I go, oh, crap, it's my turn. You'd make a call, and you get blown off, and you'd go, now it's your turn, and you sit there and listen to the other guy, and you'd learn, okay, what worked, what didn't, and just having someone there was the motivation you needed, because you never would do it on your own, because it was just hell. Like, we both hated it, and we weren't very good at it, but we knew you had to do it, so, it was much easier if you could sit there with a partner to share your misery. And so just like we'd pass it back and forth, and every once in a while you talk to someone, they go, oh yeah, that's pretty good, I didn't know that you were doing that now, like tell me more about that. And you go and you get into your spiel, and they go, who, what's your name? And you go, I'm Phil White. And they go, oh, I thought it was Phil Wood, sorry, not interested, slam. It's like, and one time Gerard got it, and someone thought he was Ben Serrata, and they were super excited until they found out he wasn't Ben Serrata, and then it was like, sorry. So, I'm not sure any of our cold calls actually worked. I think what really worked was selling to triathletes and having them go out as apostles for us. Yeah. And they would demand, or they would convince their friends to ride it and loan out their bikes. And their friends would go into the local bike shop, and the local bike shop would try and sell them a Trek or a Specialized. And they go, no, I want a Cervélo. And they'd force the shop to go and order a Cervélo for them. And that was how we kind of made our foray into shops. It was really consumer driven.
How big was it for you guys when Chrissy Wellington won Kona in 2007, wasn't it? 2007, she won Kona for the first time. How big was that for you? Did you see a big jump in interest? Because obviously by then you're really well established and you've already sponsored the Tour de France team CSC at this point. Did you see a big jump in interest after that, or by then had things taken over with the road scene as well?
It's the problem with marketing is you never know what's really working and what's not. But we've been struggling to find good athletes all the way along, and she was a spectacularly good athlete and also a spectacularly good spokesman for the brand and for triathlon in general. I mean, even now she's got a massive following. So yeah, it was huge for us, and we really appreciated that. And I think a lot of other brands were more they sold more to males, and Chrissy and the luck we had with women on her team really pushed us into the female market, and we were pretty much evenly split male-female. And if you look at the ratio in triathlon, it's more male-dominated. So we did very, very well in the women's market, and we really focused on that by making bikes that fit smaller people better. So I think Chrissy really pushed that side of it for us. But as you're right, I mean, we had pretty good visibility in the market, but certainly she really kind of put us into the next level.
And this is going to be my last question around bikes specifically, but looking at the old pictures of the Baraki against what became the P5X, was there a small part of you and Gerard and you, Anna, that you were kind of like, one day we're gonna get something like the original bike into production to get people on something like the original Baraki? Was there something, because I mean there's more than a passing resemblance between the two bikes, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the original Baraki was a product of the time. We didn't have really good CFD. There was a lot of trial and error in doing it. If you did it again, you would do things differently. Plus, I guess we've got 20 years of knowledge on how to make the Baraki faster. I think the big advantage or the big advance for the P5X was all that internal storage. So you had nothing hanging out in the wind, and we've been working on that ever since the P4. So you see we have more and more integration. And I think we kind of really started that thing. We were looking at where do we hide the original thing was the water bottles. Where do we put it? And so we put a big tank on the top tube. That didn't really work that well. And we never, and so we found actually the best thing was putting your bottle between your arms. And even when it's empty, put it between your arms because it still helps smooth the airflow off your arms or off your hands. But the other elements of that, they really carried that to the next level in the P5X. And so I think it's a good bike from that standpoint. I guess a lot of people looked at that and the Diamondback and said, "Hey, that harkens back to the Baraki for sure."
And then all the way along through the story of Cervélo, that there seems to be, I don't know, maybe this is my mindset, but it seemed like there were forces working against you from the big banks, and almost every turn, Anna, you tell a story where somebody doesn't give you the money they've promised you, and all of a sudden, well, we're going to stop this loan from this bank and we're going to bring in a team of independent financiers and they're going to take over and give you this. And did it feel like that along the way, that there were forces working against you in the banking world to try and kind of lever Cervélo out of your hands and into the arms of a bigger financial institution?
I think cash flow was always a challenge for Cervélo, just because they started off so lean, and they just continued that kind of model. And of course, the banks are always very conservative, and the inventory wasn't something that banks appreciated.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't say that there were forces playing against Cervélo, but
I'm being a bit dramatic, aren't I?
Yeah, it wasn't that dramatic, but I definitely think cash flow was always a challenge. And in retrospect, our wisdom is that we probably should have got an equity partner into the business sooner, just to provide that kind of stability. But the real financial challenge came when Phil and Gerard started the Cervélo test team, and at the same time that they were trying to find a title sponsor was the time of the financial crash in the 2008-2009 era. So that was really caused some big financial issues.
Perfect timing to start your own Tour de France team, hey?
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, exactly.
So how great was it for you guys when you saw Carlos Sastre win the Tour de France riding your bikes? Was that for you kind of a yes moment?
Yeah, that was phenomenal. I mean, we were CSC or Bjorn Rees set us up with seats right on the finish line for that event, like on the Champs-Élysées, and so we were right there, and he rolled over the finish line, and then came to see us. And there's a video we have somewhere, and I'm hugging him. I'm so hard, I just about ripped his neck off. I was like, I just couldn't believe that we were finally there. That was amazing. I mean, just to sit there and see him. I mean, we were sitting. Jordan and I were following him all the way through. Obviously, we were at the tour. We took our employees over that year. And then we had a team building on Alpe d'Huez, and of course Carlos wins the day on Alpe d'Huez. It's like the stage on Alpe d'Huez. That was phenomenal. And then we go on to Paris, and so we were sitting in a cafe in Paris watching the time trial and just biting our nails like the day before. I was like, is he going to hold it? Because he wasn't known as a great time trialist, but the yellow jersey gives you minutes, and that's clearly what it gave him that day. And then watching the ride into Paris was just, it was certainly one of the best days of my life.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Hey, and listen then, finally, just to wrap this interview up, the triathletes and time trialists listening would kill me if I missed the opportunity to ask probably the foremost aerodynamicist in the world, like, how do we get faster? What can we do? What's the low-hanging fruit after all your hundreds of hours in the wind tunnel and CFD? What can they do firstly with the stuff they've got already to get faster, and then talk them through which Cervélo bike they should buy in order to get faster?
Oh, it's easy. I mean, the first thing is take all your equipment, sell it, and buy a Cervélo. No,
it worked for me.
After you've done that, I mean, the nice thing about disc wheels is that they allow you to run a deep carbon rim all year round in any conditions, training and racing, whether it's wet or dry out, and you never have to worry about your braking. And the reason that's important, is because the deep carbon wheels are always faster. I'm a big fan of the Head Vanquish. I just came back from the wind tunnel 2 weeks ago, and that is a wicked fast wheel. But run as deep a wheel as you feel confident in running. And the nice thing is, if you're going out and training on it all the time, you'll get used to it. Anyone can run a 40 millimeter front almost under any conditions. I'm totally convinced of that. Anyone can do that. Run a deeper rear wheel because you don't feel it. It doesn't push your steering around. You can run at least a 60. So run the deepest wheels you can and run them all the time. So you're used to it all the time training on it. And then when you go to a race, you're not worried about the race wheels. You're not worried about getting a separate set of wheels there. You're just racing and training all the time. You'll be much more comfortable and you'll be faster on it. So that's the thing on wheels. And of course, the disc wheel, the braking actually works, which is kind of novel. And if you ever go down a hill in wet weather in the Alps or something on rim brakes and then do the same thing on disc brakes, you'll thank me for telling you to get disc brakes.
Yeah.
So disc brakes open up better braking, but also the opportunity to run one set of wheels and run them all the time. So that's an easy way to get faster. And then, just playing with your position, especially the position of your hands. And have a look at what the guys on the track are doing. They're really pushing the limits on it, and have a look and see how they're positioning their hands and their with respect to the front, and you can learn something from them for sure.
Awesome. Great. Hey, well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and do the interview with us. It's super great for me as a massive fan of Cervélo to talk to you. Anna, you've done a wonderful job on this book. As I said to you before the interview, I've read it once all the way through, and I'm on my second time through now. And you're a fantastic storyteller that goes into loads of detail, and there's so many funny stories in here that we haven't had a chance to get into even on the podcast, unfortunately, because half an hour goes by in a click of a fingers, it seems like. But thanks very much again for your time. And the last thing to tie up, now you're out of Cervélo, what are you doing now? What are the plans? Do you have anything else bike related in the mix, or is that it for one lifetime?
No, I got a bunch of things in the mix. I'm doing some consulting on some high performance bikes, and I'm really interested in mobility and how do we move people faster. And so two elements of that. One is how do we take an e-bike drive system and take half the weight out of it. And the other thing is all of these things about e-bikes and different types of e-bikes, different types of mobility, whether it's a scooter or a bike or electric scooter or a push scooter or a three-wheeler or whatever, they all have an element of electronics in them. And I've been working with some companies on that, the common electronics needed to manage and control data and communications on the bike. So I think there's going to be some really interesting innovations coming along there in the next little bit.
Interesting. All right, listen, thank you both so much for your time, and I hope we can talk again soon.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.
Really cool. I love that, Hells. It's not often you get a chance to talk to your heroes, is it?
No, really not very often at all. So yeah, it's good to get like an insight, and I always like the stories of people who start the businesses, in their kitchen or in their garage or whatever, and then go on and be really, really successful with it.
It's ace to know, isn't it, that you can really genuinely do something like that. You can start a bike brand in your basement as a college project, and it can go on to be a massive part of everyone's endurance heritage, essentially. And more than anything, I mean, I've got the chance to have read this book, and all the way through, it's a real lesson in how, I think if anyone's starting up a business, you tend to assume that everybody else knows what they're doing and you don't. But this book is a real lesson in that probably nobody really knows what they're doing along the way. Everyone's just fumbling along and, turning up to a bike show with bikes in the back of a car and then trying to sell them after the expo so they don't have to take them back. It's really, really cool. So anyway, the cool news is they gave us this copy of the book. We've got the copy of the book to give away to a listener, and we said all the way through January, we're going to, basically as a thanks to anyone who's left a review of the show on iTunes, we're going to pull names into the hat and pull a name out. So we've still got about 9 days left in January. So what we'd like you to do is leave a review of the show on iTunes, please, and then post a screenshot of the review on the thread in the Oxygenaddict Triathlon Facebook group. Then you'll get into this prize draw to win a copy of the book. If you're not already a member, join the group anyway. And do you know, Hal, since last week, we've had 10 more 5-star reviews on iTunes, which is super awesome.
That is, lots of nice people writing nice things about it.
Yeah, it's really sweet, actually. I'm trying to get my copy of iTunes open at the moment so I can give people a name check, actually. Have you got yours open there at the moment?
Yeah, Lanny Ladd, GJV22, Nicola Goodwin, Mackham21, Escape EDI, and By Will, Phil Jeffries, Coxie, and Joanna Hantz.
Brilliant. Nice one. Having the thing up on the screen there, Hells. Love it. And thank you very much for everyone who's left reviews for us. We really appreciate it. Basically, what happens is the reviews are the thing that iTunes use to determine whether people see your show or not when you search for Triathlon Podcast in iTunes, which is why it's such a big deal to us. So if you can find a minute or two to leave a review for us, that would be super awesome. So you've got about 9 days left to get on there. Enter that to be in the prize draw to win a copy of the book, The Cervélo Story. It is totally gorgeous. It's a beautiful coffee table book, and it's well worth having, especially if you're a bike geek like me. So get on there, leave a review, and post a screenshot up in the OATC group on Facebook. That would be
Rob,
awesome.
Can I say something which will make you laugh? Have you ever binge watched a I don't know, like a Netflix series or something like that?
Do you know, Hells, I'm currently binge watching Modern Family as we speak.
Oh,
yeah.
Is it worth binge watching?
Have you never seen it?
No.
Oh, Hells. Modern Family is it's like the Friends of the next generation. It's as good as that. It's really, really funny.
Oh.
If I've just introduced you to Modern Family,
you have.
This is my, and maybe who knows, however many thousand people around the world who might not have seen it as well. There's about 8 series of it out. It's brilliant.
Okay, so when you binge watch, how many might you watch in a week?
I don't watch a huge amount of TV, so binge watching for me is probably 1 episode a night.
Okay, 1 episode a night. Okay, so 7.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So it's sort of on a part. Macam21 said currently catching up and have listened to 5 episodes in a week. So he's binge listening to the Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast.
That's good going. I'm impressive.
Yeah. And I like this as well from Lanny Lad, who said, my favourite interview was with Mark Allen, who underlined the deeper magic of triathlon as a transformative life pursuit.
Oh, that's a good interview. Talking to Mark, he was really good, because only half of it was about triathlon, wasn't it? The other half of it was all about balancing life and his spiritual practice and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, really very, very insightful.
Do you know, I'm thinking about going on another one of their retreats next year.
Do you mean this year or genuinely next year?
Next year.
It's 2020?
In 2020, yeah. They do like a 6-day retreat to Mount Shasta, and I've always wanted to go there. So
do it.
Yeah.
Just hit that enter button, Rob.
Yeah.
I've managed not to enter anything else at the moment this week, but I did hit buy on some flights to the warmer climes.
Oh, really? Where to?
Sardinia.
Nice. When are you going there?
June.
Brilliant. Is
with
there a
bikes.
Race attached, or is it
no race attached? But we are taking bikes
and Helen plus Man epic adventure.
Yeah, we might chill. We're not going to kill ourselves doing 100-mile days this year. She says right now. No, we're not going to.
That's not like you.
No, I know. We don't have plans to ride around the whole of Sardinia, because Sardinia is actually quite big, and we don't have sort of 2.5 weeks like we had the other year, and we genuinely don't want to go and I don't know. It's amazing, but it's quite tiring as well when you do that. So we are taking bikes, and Rob, this is just ridiculous, which is why I was like, oh my god, I'm buying them. £60 return.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bargain hunter.
The bikes obviously cost more. The bikes
cost more than you to fly there, don't they? That's the great irony of it.
But not for £150 return, including your bike
and a bit of sun. Yeah, I agree.
Not bad, is it?
Yeah, I think I got a similar kind of deal on the flights to Fuerte. And
yes.
If you can get yourself out there in the wintertime, it makes a big difference, doesn't it?
So excited.
Yeah,
so excited.
Oh, right. Coach's Couch, we've had a question from Will Pither,
who says, on the bike, is a road bike okay? Can anything be tweaked to make it better or faster?
Great question, and a load of things have popped up over the last couple of weeks in our Facebook community group around this whole kind of idea of, can you talk a little bit to the people who are beginners and who are doing their first season of triathlon coming up? Because it's all very well talking about, the tiny details of FTP testing and things, but let's talk about the generalities of stuff. So first up, Will, great question. Thanks for sending it in. Yes, riding a road bike is totally fine in a race. And especially if it's your first season of triathlon, or even if it's not, if you get yourself a nice road bike, there's absolutely no reason that you can't ride that in all your triathlons. Now, you're probably going to go a little bit faster on a time trial bike than you will on a road bike, but that's not to say you can't do things to your road bike in order to make yourself get a bit of, I'm going to use the phrase free speed, Hells, but I don't think the word free is in the correct context here, is it?
No.
We should call it expensive speed, shouldn't we?
Yes.
So you can buy stuff to make your bike faster, and we'll call it free speed to make ourselves feel better about it. So the things that you can change on your road bike, the first thing I would say is think about your body before you think about your bike. So by simply having tight fitting clothing on, a tri-suit or a skin suit type suit rather than just a t-shirt and shorts, or even baggy cycling clothing, that's going to be the first thing that's going to make you faster, because the aerodynamic drag from you and your clothes is much greater than the drag off your bike. So tight fitting tri-suit first thing. And then the next thing to think about is getting a pair of clip-on aero bars for your road bike that'll really help improve your bike position, get you down out of the wind. And again, you're the biggest thing that's creating aerodynamic drag there. So by bending over at the waist and getting you a bit lower, massively reduces that aerodynamic drag. So they're two really big wins. And then if you want to tweak your bike and you really want to start spending money, the next thing you can look at doing is getting a pair of aerodynamic wheels. So anything in the realm of 40 to 60 millimeters tends to be the sweet spot for people where you don't get your bike handling affected very much, if at all, but they do make a significant difference to your speed. So you're talking anything up to 2 kilometers an hour faster with the right pair of wheels on a day that's not too windy, just for changing your wheels. So they're the big things, I would say, that are going to be the things you can tweak to make yourself faster. It's a skin suit, it's aero bars, and maybe a set of more expensive wheels. But just think in terms of how much money have I got to spend? Do I really, is the overall race result actually going to be that important to me? And how close to the point end of the field am I? Because I raced, do you remember I did that Lakesman half last year, Hells?
Yeah.
One of the guys who finished top 3 overall came by me on a road bike with no aerodynamic wheels on. He came by me like I was standing still, like he'd been launched from a rocket. And I just thought, wow, look how fast that guy's going. And he's relatively new to the sport, super fit, fell runner, just borrowed a bike and got on with the job. And his fitness was the thing that made the biggest difference to him. Now, he probably would have won if he'd been on a fast time trial bike, but it just goes to show it's more about the person and the engine than it is about the bike.
Totally. And I would absolutely agree with that. And I'd say, didn't Chrissy Wellington do her first Ironman on a road bike, which she won? And I know you're talking sort of the extreme end of talent and everything, but you still have to go out and do the work. So yeah, she did her first Ironman on a road bike and only got a TT bike, I think, for going to Kona. So
I think it's well worth remembering, isn't it, that most races can be an incredibly intimidating place to be as you walk up to transition and see lots of incredibly expensive bikes around. But don't let that fool you into thinking that the people there are not incredibly friendly just because they've spent a lot on the bike. It can look really serious, but the triathlon community in general is full of really nice people who really want to help people out. So just kind of get over the idea that you have to have loads of expensive kit, especially when you're starting out. Just go in and get stuck in and have fun. And that's the spirit and attitude that everyone wants, isn't it, really?
Definitely. I did my first half Ironman on a road bike. In fact, I did my first Ironman on a road bike.
Yeah, me too.
Didn't have a TT bike. And the first Ironman, I didn't even have nice wheels.
Yeah.
I had some clip-on aero bars by that point, so I progressed slightly. But
I think if you're in the UK, Will, especially, like the two of the big races over here, Ironman UK and Ironman Wales in particular, arguably are more suited to road bikes than time trial bikes for the majority of people anyway, because of the nature of the hilliness and the sharp corners and things. So yeah, shouldn't be a barrier, should it?
Definitely shouldn't be a barrier. No.
Not that it's my place to not discourage people from buying stuff if they want to. Right, so just to wrap this up before the end of the show today, a couple of things for you all to be aware of. You're listening to us now on maybe iTunes or Stitcher or something like that. We are now also listed on Spotify. So if you search for Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast on Spotify, and all the shows are up on YouTube every week as well. So it's probably going to be less relevant to listen to it on YouTube, but it is there. Definitely Spotify. I know loads of people are listening to their podcast these days on Spotify. So finally managed to get it sorted. It's very complicated, Hells, when you're a bear of little brain like me, to get these things to work right sometimes.
No, it's not. You've got to, it is, what I mean is, it is very complicated. I was trying to say it's not about your brain. It's the fact that these things are complicated and especially if you don't have a background in in anything like, web design, or exactly, then you've got to learn and you've got to teach yourself. And yes, you can teach yourself so much, but actually if someone then goes, yes, you just have to click that, you're like, oh, who knew?
Yeah. Well, we're there now, which is great. So I use Spotify all the time, and I find it much more intuitive than the podcast player. So so we're there. You can listen to us on there. So YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, any of that stuff, you can listen to all the shows through that medium. Who knows? Maybe you'll be able to squirrel away and pretending you're watching training videos at work when actually you've got the YouTube up in the background.
just get some good headphones and hide away and hit play, and it's all fine. Rob, the menopause special will be coming out over the next couple of weeks.
Great stuff.
Yes.
Great stuff. So watch this space for that. What else have you got going on this week, Hells? Have you got any news lined up?
Any more news lined up? We're going to be speaking to Joel Filial later.
Exciting stuff.
And that's about it, really, Rob, I think.
Cool. I've got an interview with Joe Skipper lined up. So any questions for him, you can fire them over to us as well. That'd be good to get some listener input for things we want to ask Joe. Fresh off his, I want to say 7th place at Kona, although I'm not sure it was 7th or 8th. I think it was 7th.
And absolutely smashing it in the pool down under at the moment, Rob.
Yeah. He's living the life, isn't he? Good lad.
He's working hard.
Great stuff. All right, well, listen, that's just about everything from us for this week then. Thanks very much for listening. Remember, you can check out our sponsors, precisionhydration.com, teamoxygenaddict.com, and fueledbycake.com. And remember, if you want to win a copy of that book, The Cervélo Story to Make Athletes Faster, just get onto iTunes, leave us a 5-star review, and then post a screenshot in the OATC Facebook group. So until next week, thanks very much, everybody. You've been listening to the Oxygenaddict Triathlon Podcast. I'm Coach Rob Wilby.
I'm Helen Murray.
And have a great, safe training racing week and enjoy the nights that are getting lighter. We'll speak to you all again soon. Cheers now. Bye.